Hi, and welcome to our online narrative experimental film project. First, I want to thank you for participating and hope that you enjoy the experience. I'm sure we'll all learn something. I also want to begin by explaining the basis of my perspective on film acting. You'll learn about the importance I believe the audience has in every decision we make as filmmakers and actors. When we're creating or telling a story, we need to ask, what does the audience need to know? And when do they need to know it? Two-time Academy Award-winning screenwriter William Goldman wrote in his first book that a screenplay is only two things: story and structure. Sometimes a character will say something or ask a question that you think they should already know. That isn't for the character, it's for the audience. The audience needs information. Filmmaking is intended for an audience. So all decisions about character need to serve the story for the benefit of the audience. Some actors will effectively make choices about the character that are independent of the story. They will draw undue attention to themselves or create a narrative conflict with another character. So if an actor begins, I think my character would do whatever, the evaluation of that choice should be, how does it serve the story? With the audience and story in mind, I'm always interested in acting choices that effectively communicate. Does it matter what we feel? It may, but I'm not really interested in what the actor feels. I'm interested in what the character communicates. If that requires the actor to feel it, then fine. If not, we have to find something else outside of those feelings. I've heard the question asked many times about a scene or performance: how did that feel? This isn't therapy. The question should be asked by the actor, did I communicate that well? I'm not interested in what the actor felt. I'm interested in what the audience should feel. The audience doesn't respond to the actor's feelings. They respond to the actor's behavior. Now, I'm going to tell you 3 stories from my experience that I hope will help you understand my perspective and how we can overcome the obstacles of making someone else's words, and sometimes even our own, sound more natural. Number 1, Random Hearts. Random Hearts was a film by the late Sidney Pollack and starred Harrison Ford and Kristen Scott Thomas. I'd been cast as a coroner in that film. Don't look for the scene that didn't make the final cut. And that is a common experience for many actors, unfortunately, when they find out show's running too long, or they really didn't need that scene, or they only needed a piece of that scene, and suddenly your anticipation is seeing yourself on the screen only to find it gone. If you want to find a terrible experience of that, if you have the DVD of Sweet Home Alabama, you'll find an entire character in about 8 or 9 scenes that were cut because the audience got the wrong idea. And that's why I'm always saying it's so important to understand what the audience understands and certainly what they need to know. Now, in the case of Random Hearts, we have gathered together to do a scene following the crash of an airplane. My job as a coroner is to explain what happened and how the people died from that impact. They had assembled local actors, and in addition to that, some local reporters who worked on TV in the metro area. When Sidney Pollack came in, he wanted to rehearse the scene naturally, so he began with the first reporter and said, "Let me hear your line." That reporter delivered the line and he said, "No, stop, just ask the question." And the reporter repeated and he said, No. He said, "You're acting. I don't want any acting in here." Now, the first thing that goes through my mind, of course, is, what? That's why I'm here. I'm here to act. That's what I want to do. And now Sidney doesn't want any acting. What are we doing? So he turns to the next reporter. He says, "Let me hear your line." That reporter delivers the line and he said, "No, you're doing the same thing this reporter did. I just want you to say the line. You're a reporter. You do this all day long. Just ask the question." Now, the problem here is there is a difference between things that you're thinking up in the moment, even if you have prepared the question to ask ahead of time, and doing it in such a way where the focus is not on the question, but it's on how you ask the question. And I've seen this on numerous occasions. You'll hire a doctor. So because it's a medical report, you just tell the doctor, you're a doctor, you know what all that is, say it. You hire a policeman to play a policeman. You don't have to act, just say the line, and so forth and so on. I will tell you, it doesn't work like that. It's not magic. Because you are something, that you can say a line written to you about a character who also is the same thing that you are. It's still about knowing what the intent is to deliver that line. Now, fortunately, when he got to me, I delivered the line evidently adequately, because he said, good, and then he moved on to the next person. So I was delighted. I was somewhat struck by the feeling that I had that I finally got to work with this director, however briefly, and I really didn't want him talking to me. Because so far the only conversation was, you're acting, stop, no acting, stop. All right, I'm going to have to work with you. So you can understand the notion of, first of all, trying to get to the place where you are delivering intent, but not the very specifics of the words. And when you're in an audition, the focus predominantly is on the words. Years ago, I remember my fourth grade teacher read to the class Charlotte's Web. And she did it with enthusiasm, and she did it with emphasis on particular words, and made the story come alive. She was nevertheless reading. She wasn't talking to us, she was reading to us. And it's that reading aspect that comes in too frequently in auditions, where people are focused on saying a word with a particular intonation rather than thinking about what's the message. Because sometimes the message is not in the word. In fact, sometimes the opposite is what is intended for the actor to deliver, contrary to the words. So you really have to understand what you are trying to communicate, and it's not always in the words. Number 2, rehearsal. Some years ago, I was helping teach a class in acting, and after the first night, I would give each student a monologue that I had written. And the only instruction I gave them was, don't memorize it. But next week, you'll come in and you'll present this monologue to the class. The reason I did that is twofold. Because students will focus on the notion of memorizing something. They'll come in the next week. It won't be completely memorized, and you'll see them searching for the lines, and so the monologue isn't going to work. The second reason is I wanted to see what they would do during that week to understand the monologue, how much time they would spend with it. Knowing that I had authored it, would they ask me questions? And I will tell you, no one ever asked questions. So one thing that's very important is to ask questions, to get the answers that we need to know. And if you want to find out more about that monologue, it's in my book, shameless plug. So one week a student comes back in, makes the presentation. Afterwards, I'm asking everyone, what did you do during this week to prepare? And this student said, well, you told us not to memorize it, so I never looked at it again. I said, you didn't look at it again? No, because I wanted it to be fresh. I said, okay, well, that was raw, because you have no idea what that monologue is about. You didn't study it. You didn't ask any questions. You didn't think about it at all. And I will tell you that what an actor does to prepare includes that study, because every night of every performance or of every take, those lines have to be fresh. They have to seem like they are being said for the first time every time they're being said. And that can only happen with study and rehearsal. Otherwise, the performance is just raw. So don't think you're attempting to be fresh by having a go at it one time without any understanding whatsoever. Number 3, emotion is underneath, not on top. I'm going to try to detail as much as I can without revealing too much about the individual. This person had been on a reality TV show and was being given the opportunity to audition for a new dramatic television series. Came to me for coaching. One of the first things I did in our early sessions was to teach this individual something about scripted lines and the difficulty that can result when you haven't adequately rehearsed, even if you are the author. During our first meeting, I had the student tell me a story about the preparation undertaken for the series. I recorded about 3 minutes of those details. Before our next meeting, I transcribed those notes word for word, pause for pause, for exactly as it was originally delivered. The following week, when the student came in, I presented the student with the script, and I said, I haven't changed anything. I haven't added anything. These are your words. This is your experience. I want you to stay on the script and tell me this story again. As you might imagine, it wasn't very good, and that in no way is any disrespect to the student. It was to make a point that even when we use our own words, it's a different experience. And that's because they are coming from a different place. These were words coming from a memory of an experience. In the second meeting, they were words coming from a page. During a conversation, there is an emotional basis for the words we choose. The words come out of that foundation. When we read a script for the first time, actors typically layer the words by adding emotion on top. That's what we do when we read, and that's why many auditions simply sound like reading. The important thing to consider here is what's underneath. What was the driving force that got those words to come out in the first place? Many times I have to strip that layer off the top. I've often thought if there was one piece of advice I could give an actor that would be right more often than not, it would be throw it away. Meaning comes with the line rather than simply in the line. It is the result of the communicative need. To keep lines from sounding read, acting is really more what you don't do than what you do. So if I ask you to bring it down or understate it, you'll understand where this approach derives. I certainly hope we will all enjoy the process. And when all is said and done, we'll have something that we're all proud of.